Hi everyone, how's it going today? It's windy today here. Door's going to slam in the background a little bit, but today on Ramblin' We'll Talk an Anime. Today I'm drawing Kaina, my original character from my book Saint Saga. She appears in Volume 2. Bit of a redesign going on with her, so I hope you enjoy that while I kind of talk here in the background. But today's topic, we're revisiting Princess Lessons because Princess Lessons is honestly one of my favorite shows of the season so far, but for maybe a different reason than intended. So what if Princess Lessons were 25% darker? That's the thing. Whenever I watch an episode of this show, I just like, man, if this wasn't a rom-com, this would be so fucking dark. Like, really, it is. Like, every time, everything they do is always played off as humorous, but it is, if you just think about the show a little too much, which I do sometimes, it is dark. Like in the last two episodes, I think it's 4 and 5, 4 or 5 here. Letty gets, let's see, I gotta check her name. It's Leticia is the heroine. She's the girl with red hair. I'll have her picture up here. And, but her nickname's Letty. I'm just going to call her Letty because that's easier for me to say. So Letty gets basically taken to the castle after she gets brought back from the village she ran off to. She gets brought back by Prince Clark. And she is locked in a room, like Rapunzel style, like straight up locked in the room. Her previous servant Lily is gone, and she's just isolated in this room with this new castle servant who is straight up trying to gaslight her. Like, they wake her up and it's like, oh, Mrs., like, I'm not married yet. It's like, oh, sorry about that, Mrs. It's like, they're just trying to gaslight this girl. And it's a wild ride. I love it. I do love it. But like I said, every time I'm watching this show, it's always like, man, if this show, if it didn't have like fourth wall breaks and all the extra humor, it would be a dark show. Like, I just straight up, like, so Letty's always trying to escape. She was happy when she thought her marriage to a prince got dissolved, and she keeps trying to run away. The prince declares that he will only have heirs with this woman, which is very faithful for, considering the time period, I think, that this is taking place in. So now you kind of think you're going to be feeling a little sympathetic for the prince. I'm kind of not, but I'm also trying not to let modern sensibilities get in my way of the story, I guess I should say. So I'm going to go into the last two episodes here. I think it's 4 and 5, but so Letty gets captured. She tries to escape out the window. Like, she ties her bed sheets into a rope, which actually kind of would work if you had enough bed sheets, I guess. Cloth is stronger than you think, but she basically breaks out of a window to fall into the garden, and Prince Clark is there to catch her because he's kind of onto her. Which, to be fair to Prince Clark, he's not a bad guy, but I find it really hard to like him. Partly because he's a prince, but also just his attitude about the whole thing is, you want to be a little sympathetic to him, but you're also not. And I'll get more into that later. So she gets locked. So she goes from the cushy upper second story room, and they basically put her in a noble dungeon. By that, it's basically like when a CEO gets actually charged with a crime if they go to the prison that has a golf course. She's in that. So she's in an underground room now with bars and stuff. So she is essentially a prisoner. She still has her same maid girl with her. And it's still a lavish room. It's still a room fit for her home, but she is imprisoned, which is, like I said, that's pretty dark. She is actively trying to escape this marriage. She has no desire to be the queen. And, I understand historically at the time, if she would have refused, she would have been, probably killed or exiled. They wouldn't let her continue to live a lavish life, to be honest. But on the other hand, too, she's such a tomboy that I don't know if she would really mind. That's one of the things in the story. I'm not quite sure. Like Letty has expressed, she wants to go. She wants to go fly fishing and stuff like that, and be outdoors. Actually, the more I describe her, the more I'd be okay with her. But just in like the modern, in the medieval context, the story takes place in. This is it's one of those things where it's like, there's a bit of modern hand waving, I guess I should say, for her, because back in those days, you wouldn't just be able to live a life. Most people grew their own food unless you're in the city. But she wants to escape to the countryside. So she'd spend a good chunk of her day just preparing to survive the next day. But we'll just hand wave that away because this is not exactly fantasy. There hasn't been any magic. Historical fiction, I guess we'll call it. So there's that, But we never really got into but even when she escaped to like her family's summer home mansion. So it's like, would she get by as a peasant? I feel like she would. I feel like her personality would be able to handle it. But it's one of the things too, a lot of the stuff she wants to do is kind of more of a luxury. Like, most people fish with nets because nets are more effective than rods. If she's just fishing for herself, she can fish for herself. So she would be able to feed herself. But that's just the thing. The story at this point, the show at this point, has not answered the question if she would be able to be self-efficient enough in this world if she didn't have the backing of her family, who are dukes. Like her father's, is her father a duke or a margrave? He has to be pretty high ranking for the prince to even consider marrying her, is all I'm going to say. So there's those questions. That kind of gets me a little bit off of Letty's side a little bit, because it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I can kind of understand she wants her freedom you have some modern sensibilities where it's like, yeah, they are kidnapping this girl into an arranged marriage, and she's basically been groomed to be the queen in a lot of ways. But the thing that keeps me on Letty's side though is everybody around her is probably acting as they should be in this society. Like the purple-haired girl that shows up, I don't remember her name. She's going to be purple-haired girl for now. The one that the prince brought to the ball to kind of make Letty jealous. I'm not sure it really worked, but she's in charge of trying to keep an eye on Letty, and she comes and visits in the dungeon room, and she shows Letty this book that the prince had made up that is a complete fiction. That the princess, that she's enduring the princess lessons to be a better prince for him and be a better queen for the people. Kind of give her some public support and stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's really cool of him. That's a very smart. That's a very smart political strategy. If there's ever any doubt in her, if there's any, it's kind of just a political ploy to make sure there's no resistance to her becoming queen, which is very smart on his part. That is a prop for the prince. He does things out. He kind of comes off as a little bit of an airhead and maybe a little self-absorbed in some ways, but he does have intelligence. So I'll give him that. But once again, this book is basically meant to kind of gaslight the people and kind of gaslight her into going into this relationship. So there is that. And she has repeatedly refused the prince. And I think she has stated at least once that she would give up the noble life, but I don't know if that was ever said explicitly. So I'm kind of ranking on that. But anyways, to get back to what makes this story so dark. So not only are they gaslighting her, they're basically trying to railroad her into becoming the queen. Her own brother and family are kind of just laissez-faire with it, just kind of letting it happen. The brother definitely wants it to happen because he wants to get in bed with the royals. But so besides this book that the prince had made up that kind of completely distorts the reality to her, basically. The thing, it's just everybody's attitude about it's like, oh, it's so great you're getting married to the prince. Oh, it's so great you're going to be queen. It's like, she has repeatedly said She does not want to be queen. She, like, even when the prince made this whole sanctuary for her where she'd have like all the animals and all the free space she'd want on the palace grounds, she outright refused. And what makes this story so dark is like everybody's kind of giving her this attitude. Now, I will say her attitude is more that of a modern woman's mindset and attitude than of what a woman of this time maybe would be. That sounds weird when I say it, but that's kind of how I have to describe it. She's kind of weird. She's weirdly out of place in her own world because people act on their social things. But I'll give her credit because I have to say, when they started the princess lessons for her at like age 6 to 9, I'm going to say 9. When they start, let's see, 10 years. She's been doing the lesson for 10 years. So at least from age 6 to 7, I think, was when they took her to. So at age 6, they take her away from her family. She was kind of a tomboyish girl, but she was still lady. She still dressed like a lady. So at a young age, they take her away from her family. They don't even let her bring her dog. Then they start subjecting her to the instructor. The instructor in this is just kind of the crux of the thing, where it's like this is where the problems kind of start. But it's also like she got picked to be the prince's fiance at age 6 or 7. Kind of doesn't matter at this point. She's enduring these harsh princess lessons for 10 years away from her family. I don't think they ever let her see her family after that. Like, I don't think her parents ever visited. Like, I think maybe her brother might have visited a little bit, but her mother and father maybe weren't allowed to visit. Maybe. And then she's just stuck with this woman who's basically torturing her teaching her proper etiquette and ladylike. That's the thing. I don't know how much of an exception this is because, she's being groomed to be the queen, so she's getting trained at a high standard. But here's the thing: like the purple girl who became the prince's fiance for a hot second, she took the lessons for like 2 days before she gave up, which I feel like is kind of. She was allowed to quit because she wasn't supposed to become queen, the purple girl, but then Letty had to continue enduring these lessons for 10 years. And I have to say, I can understand why she doesn't have any sympathies for the prince in a lot of ways. Because, yeah, the prince is in love with her. That is clear. But she's kind of forced to endure these lessons she didn't want. She was told at age 6. She was chosen to be queen. She had to endure these lessons she didn't want to do. She was ripped away from her family. And the fact that in the story so far, nobody has even acknowledged, like, yeah, that might have caused some issues, some childhood trauma. We basically took her from her family, never let her see her family for 10 years almost, as far as I'm aware. Didn't even let her bring her damn dog. And then just mentally tortured her. So her entire personality was turned on its head, and she became a proper normal lady. And nobody thinks this is a problem. Now, I will say, given her situation, I've repeated it off. Her mindset for the setting is a little off, but I'm just gonna roll with it for the story. So I'm just looking at this from the perspective of her, where it's like she was basically tortured to be the queen because the prince liked her, and everybody else is just cool with it. Like nobody's acknowledging, like, yeah, we stole you from your family at age 10, 6, whatever. Basically made you do these grueling lessons to make you the perfect nobility. And the purple hood lady that you see in the background here, she got to give up. She only had to go through those lessons for like 10 days. And then she kind of she's like that, it's like that meme where one guy's like riddled with arrow. It's the one guy, it's from the Passion of the Christ. It's that one meme where the actor playing Jesus has the crown is that he's covered in blood, and then he's like sitting next to like a sound guy completely fine. It's like rough day. Just like it's like somebody gets stabbed and somebody pricks their finger. It's like, oh, I understand your pain now. It's like, no, you don't, you bitch. But so, and one of whenever I'm watching the episode, I'm seeing Letty try to escape, and she keeps getting dragged back by the servants, the prince. and she's yelling at them, saying, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't care to be queen. Completely kind of outright rejecting the prince's proposals, his feelings, which you can have your thoughts on. But it's like, I just look at the situation. It's like, okay, she doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to be queen. At some point, I feel like the politics of the crown would be like, okay, this is causing a lot of problems. If it's this bad now, obviously at some point in the more realistic sense, like she would eventually have to give heirs like that, and it's going down a road where the Prince Clark in the story wouldn't do it, but it's like this is leading to some implications. So it's like at some point you'd feel like the king and queen would be like, okay, you got to get this settled, or you're going to have to actually pick a new bride because this is a lot of headaches. But if not, they're just going to completely violate Letty's human rights, and which I doubt they have in this time period or the story. But we'll just say they do because they give her a lot of leeway because of the prince, probably. But the thing, switching from Letty to the prince here, it's like, so the prince is just kind of smothering her with his affection, which she is clearly uncomfortable with, but he enjoys seeing her express her emotions. Like the part of the reason he took the purple girl on the date to the ball there was he wanted to make Letty jealous, but he also wanted to get her kind of a reaction out of her, basically. So he's kind of playing with fire there. And he never dissolved the engagement, but she thought she did. Honestly, if I was in that situation where a woman was so happy to leave me that she broke her public persona of a high class noble lady, broke that and ran out of the castle and basically booked it to Timbuktu. It's like, oof, oh boy, maybe forcing her into this marriage wasn't a great idea, especially if you actually really liked her. But so every time they lock Letty back in her room, or they take her for her attempts to escape, every time they bring her back to the room, I'm just thinking like, one day you guys are going to walk into this room and you're just going to find a chair on the floor and her hanging from the ceiling. I don't know, I'm not very familiar with the YouTube lines, but that's what I think. It's like, one day you're going to walk in here and she's just going to be on the floor. She's going to have done it and it's going to be your fault. And so it's like, like eventually I feel, she kind of has too much of a happy personality to maybe do that. And the tone of the show does not indicate that at all. But it's one of those things where it's like, man, every time I'm watching an episode, it's like, guys, I get that at some point she can't have everything she wants. That is, I'm very strict on that. She can't have everything she wants, but the prince also can't have everything he wants here too. I'm glad in the last episode they addressed that. But like I said, every time I'm watching an episode, it's like, man, is this the day where you're just going to find her hanging from the ceiling? Or have a shard from a vase just jabbed into her neck or something? It's like, this gets pretty dark. This could go pretty dark, if it was taken more seriously. Like I said, if it was 25% darker. Oh, another thing about the room they put her in, there's a secret passage that leads to the prince's secondary room, I guess we'll call it, where he basically sleeps there every night and, can use it to get into her room. And when she tries to block it, he basically comes in and orders the maid to remove the blockage from the bookshelf door, which, he says he's not going to consummate the marriage until they're married, but it's also like, this is kind of creepy, dude. Like, he could and like I said, it's another thing too, where obviously the servants can't really chastise the prince, but it's also kind of like the more noble is like, yeah. And that kind of dragged me into the prince character. I talked about Letty a lot enough, but I'm going to talk about the prince characters just a little bit to wrap up. It's really hard for me to sympathize with the prince. Now granted, it's one of the things, he is a guy in love. And if it weren't for my grandma telling me the story of how her and my grandpa met, where my grandma wasn't really too into my grandpa at the beginning, but they worked it out and they got married. So I get that. So I have a little bit of more sympathy for him because of that. But it's also kind of like, I get the time period. He's a prince. He really doesn't have to listen to anybody if he doesn't want to, besides the king and queen, obviously. But it's one of those things, if you want this relationship to work, you do have to actually listen to what she's saying. Now, I'm going to criticize Letty because it's like she's in a position where she really can't get what she wants, so she was being a smart political lady. She would be using this to get all she can out of it, to get as much freedom as she can, because they're not going to let her go at this point. But I do feel like the prince should be chastised for his behavior. Like having a secret room, being in the secret room next to her dungeon room is like, really, dude? Like this is, which is why I'm happy when the brother, who I forget Letty's brother too. I'm just going to call her his brother. He's kind of a stone-hard bastard, basically trying to use. I thought he was just trying to use his sister to get in with the royals, but he does have some affection for her, not like in the weird way, just like he does treat her like a sibling. They have a cute moment where they do the spicy cupcake game. And I think the best part I can describe the story is Letty is immature and Prince Clark is immature. Now, her brother does tell Letty some advice where it's like, if you really want to get Prince Clark to listen to you, you got to basically stop being yourself. So he basically tells Letty, go back to your noble persona, your stone-faced noble persona, and speak to him like that and let him know you're serious. And when she does that, she kind of takes on her, we'll call it lady persona, and talks to Clark. She does manage to rein him in a little bit. Obviously, he kind of fucks that up because he decides, okay, he'll follow her rules, and he's supposed to knock at the door, basically announce when he's going to show up, but then he comes every night. So it's like, dude, it's one of those things where a little bit of space would definitely help the relationship, or at least start it at this point. So just throughout the show, so I'm a little disappointed the Queen didn't show up yet, because they made a little scene about her early on wanting to talk to her, and she hasn't shown up yet. And the next episode kind of doesn't imply they talk yet either. So I'm kind of disappointed the Queen didn't show up, because I'm really curious about Clark's parents, the King and Queen, like their thoughts on the situation. It's like, okay, son, we're still supporting this. You said you're not going to have kids with any of the other women. Okay. Maybe we should give you some actual lessons here. That's the thing that maybe bothers me about the prince, is the prince's attitude is, he can be sensible at times, but he comes off a little, everybody criticizes Letty for being immature for her station. But like I said, nobody's really giving the prince crap, which, you can argue modern sensibilities. But it's just one of those things where, just personally, it's like, if you want this to work, he needs to do something for her. But she needs to also stop. Letty needs to stop acting immature too, I guess you could say. It's one of those things where they kind of should have maybe let her run a little more wild. But they both got to compromise. The prince has to act a little bit more mature and maybe, I don't want to say subservient, but not subservient. What's the word I'm looking for? It's in the marriage phrases. Like, basically, he's listening to her and he comes to his own conclusion what's going to fix it. Like when he made the sanctuary for her, he did so after kind of investigating where she ran off to, and he made a sanctuary for her that he thought would be appropriate. But it's one of those things where he's missing the mark, and he has to. And I think it's one of those things. And I hope they do it eventually in the series here, but I hope it's one of the things the two will finally sit down, and she can kind of explain her feelings on the matter. It's like she was forced into this relationship. He actually wanted it. In a lot of ways, from her point of view, the prince kind of ruined her life, or at least ruined her childhood, because, for her to be his wife, she got ripped away from her family, wasn't allowed to bring a dog, was basically tortured for 10 years by the tutor, and in a lot of ways, you could say there could be a lot of. She has those kind of cute anime moments where she blushes when Prince Clark does something a little more intimate. But if you looked at it from a different perspective, he did kind of, from her perspective, he would be the cause of her ruining her life, or it could the King and Queen's. And that's why I said, that's what I'm gonna say. The story could be so much darker if it wanted to be. I'm kind of glad it's not. It is a fun story, but I would be a little interested in like a more serious take. I don't know if I'm gonna try and write one. I don't think I can. It's not really my typical genre, but we'll see. I'm kind of just I'm rambling towards the end here, but that's the video. I'll probably do another. I'll probably son of a bitch. I'll probably do another update. I'll probably do another video on princess lessons as the show goes on. I might have to start taking some more notes as I watch. That's the thing. I'm doing this, and I don't really want to take more notes than necessary because I'm kind of just doing this for fun. But I like to enjoy my shows before I get serious with them, trying to do YouTube videos on them. But that's all for today. I'm going to wrap it up real quick. If you want to check out my story, Saint Saga the Black Beast on Amazon, it's an action-adventure story. It's a little grim-dark. Well, not grim-dark. It's a little dark fantasy, but I don't really go into, like... It's not a romance or anything like that. It'd be like if you ever played Dragon Quest or like a Legend of Zelda game, it's kind of like that. You go on an adventure across the land. It's a little dark. It has some dark elements. It's got some gunslinging in it, some sword and sorcery. So I hope you all check it out. Let me know if you do in the comments. That'd be neat. If you do read it, I'd appreciate a review. If you don't like it, you can tell me that too. I'm pretty thick-skinned, so I can take that. I'm not going to threaten you with murder if you don't like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you take the effort, So, all right, I'm going to stop rambling. I hope you all had a good day, and see you later. I should come up with a catchphrase, I guess.